I felt the gravel dig into my knees as I knelt on the roadside, watching my son's taillights shrink to pinpoints in the distance. The desert highway stretched empty in both directions, heat rippling off the asphalt like ghostly fingers. My own flesh and blood had just abandoned me in the middle of nowhere, his final words still ringing in my ears. "Figure it out yourself, old man." Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. My relationship with Jason had been deteriorating for years, though I desperately tried to ignore the signs. I'm Tom Wilson, 63 years old and recently retired from 35 years at the same accounting firm in Phoenix. My wife Margaret passed 5 years ago from breast cancer, leaving just me and our only son to navigate life without her steady hand guiding us. Margaret had always been the buffer between Jason and me. She understood our son in ways I never could, translating his moods and mediating our increasingly frequent arguments. Without her, the distance between us grew like a canyon, widening with each passing month. "He's just finding himself, Tom," my sister Carol would say during our weekly phone calls. "Boys that age need space. He'll come around." But Jason wasn't that age anymore. At 31, he'd cycled through 4 different careers, borrowed thousands of dollars he never repaid, and moved back into my house 3 separate times. The pattern was always the same: enthusiasm for some new venture, requests for investment, followed by excuses and blame when things inevitably fell apart. His latest scheme involved flipping houses in the booming Las Vegas market. All he needed was a little starter cash, $40,000 to be exact. Money that would have come from my retirement fund. "It's practically guaranteed, Dad," he'd insisted over dinner the night before our fateful trip. "Pete's uncle is a contractor. He says the market's about to explode again." "Jason, I've already helped you with the food truck business, the cryptocurrency investment, and that mobile app you never finished developing," I reminded him. "I'm not touching my retirement savings." His face had darkened then, jaw tightening in that way that reminded me so much of his mother when she was angry. "So that's it? You're just giving up on me?" "I'm not giving up on you. I'm just not giving you any more money." The silence that followed was thick with resentment. Jason had pushed his plate away and left the table without another word. I'd gone to bed that night, feeling the familiar heaviness of failure as a father. The next morning, he'd surprised me by suggesting we take a drive out to see the Grand Canyon. "Like we used to do with Mom," he'd said with unusual softness. "I know things have been tense. Maybe we need some father-son time." Hope had fluttered in my chest like a fragile bird. This was the opening I'd been waiting for, a chance to rebuild our relationship. I'd agreed immediately, packing sandwiches and water bottles for the road trip like I used to when Jason was a boy. The first 2 hours had been pleasant enough. We'd listened to classic rock, Creedence Clearwater Revival and the Eagles, and exchanged casual conversation about sports and weather. Nothing deep, but it felt like progress. Then, somewhere on that empty stretch of Highway 93, Jason had brought up the house-flipping idea again. "I've been thinking about what you said," I'd told him, keeping my eyes on the road ahead. "Instead of giving you money, why don't I help you find a steady job? My old firm is always looking for people in accounts receivable. You wouldn't even need a degree to start." "A job?" he'd snorted, staring out the passenger window. "Working for someone else's dream? That's your solution?" "It's called being responsible, Jason. Something your generation seems to have a problem with." The moment the words left my mouth, I'd regretted them. The old pattern, me criticizing, him withdrawing, reasserting itself like a well-rehearsed dance. "Pull over," he'd said suddenly. "What?" "I said, pull over. I need to use the bathroom." I'd glanced around at the empty desert landscape. "There's nothing out here. We can stop at the next gas station. Just pull over, Dad. I'll go behind a cactus or something." Sighing, I'd guided the car onto the gravel shoulder and shifted into park. Jason had gotten out, slamming the door behind him. I'd watched in the rearview mirror as he walked around to the driver's side. "Move over," he'd commanded, opening my door. "Let me drive for a while." I'd complied, unbuckling my seatbelt and sliding across to the passenger seat. Maybe letting him take control would ease the tension. Jason had adjusted the mirrors, gunned the engine, and pulled back onto the empty highway with unnecessary force. For 20 silent minutes, we'd continued our journey, the tension building like an electrical storm. Then, without warning, he'd swerved onto the shoulder and slammed on the brakes. "Get out," he'd said, his voice flat. "What are you talking about?" "Get out of the car, Dad." His knuckles had whitened around the steering wheel. "I need some time to think, and I can't do it with you sitting there judging every decision I've ever made." "Jason, this is ridiculous. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's a gas station about 8 miles ahead. You can call someone when you get there." I'd stared at my son, searching for any sign that this was some kind of twisted joke. His face had remained impassive, eyes fixed straight ahead. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. Get out." Something in his tone had told me arguing would be pointless. With shaking hands, I'd opened the door and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder. The heat had hit me immediately, the Arizona sun merciless even in early spring. "Jason, please," he'd cut me off. "Figure it out yourself, old man." And then he'd put the car in drive and accelerated away, leaving me in a cloud of dust, which brings me back to my knees on that gravel shoulder, watching my son disappear down the highway with my car, my phone, and my wallet still in the center console. Around me, the desert stretched in every direction, cacti and scrub brush the only witnesses to this ultimate betrayal. As the dust settled, the reality of my situation began to sink in. 8 miles to the nearest gas station, according to Jason. In this heat with no water, that walk could be dangerous for someone my age. I squinted at the sun, estimating I had about 5 hours of daylight left. If I maintained a steady pace, I might reach help before nightfall. Standing up, I brushed the gravel from my knees and took stock of what I had. The clothes on my back, a half roll of breath mints in my pocket, and a baseball cap I'd thankfully been wearing. Not much to work with. I began walking, keeping to the gravel shoulder where the footing was more stable. Each step sent a jolt of disbelief through me. My own son had abandoned me here. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, cheered at Little League games. He'd driven away without a backward glance. The first hour passed in a blur of anger and hurt. I composed furious speeches I would deliver when I saw him again. I fantasized about changing the locks on my house, about cutting him out of my will, about the look on his face when he realized the consequences of his actions. By the second hour, as the sun beat down relentlessly, my anger began to give way to worry. Not for myself, though my mouth was dry and my shirt clung to my back with sweat, but for Jason. What had happened to the sweet, enthusiastic boy who used to follow me around the house, begging to help with whatever project I was working on? When had his eyes begun to hold that cold, calculating look? Had I done this to him somehow? The third hour brought physical discomfort that overrode all other concerns. My feet throbbed in my casual loafers, never meant for long-distance walking. My head pounded from dehydration, and dark spots occasionally swam across my vision. I forced myself to slow down, to take periodic rest breaks in the thin strips of shade offered by the larger cacti. During one such break, sitting with my back against a saguaro, careful to avoid its spines, I found myself thinking about Margaret. What would she make of this situation? What would she say to both of us? "You're both so stubborn." I could almost hear her gentle admonishment. Two sides of the same coin, never seeing how alike you really are. Was that true? Was Jason simply a reflection of my own worst traits? The stubbornness, the pride, the inability to admit when I was wrong. The thought was uncomfortably plausible. I had just resumed my journey, my pace considerably slower, when I heard the sound of an approaching vehicle. Hope surged through me as I turned, waving my arms frantically above my head. The blue pickup truck slowed, then pulled onto the shoulder about 20 yards ahead of me. A middle-aged woman with grey-streaked hair leaned out the driver's window. "You all right, mister?" "Car trouble," I called back, hurrying toward the truck with renewed energy. It wasn't entirely a lie. "Could you give me a ride to the next gas station?" She studied me skeptically, clearly weighing the risk of picking up a stranger. Whatever she saw, perhaps the desperation in my sunburned face or the harmlessness of my aging appearance, seemed to satisfy her concerns. "Hop in," she said, reaching across to push open the passenger door. "Air conditioning works, but the radio's busted, so you'll have to provide the conversation." Her name was Diane, and she was driving from Flagstaff to Las Vegas to visit her daughter and new grandchild. As cool air blasted from the vents, bringing blessed relief, I found myself telling her a sanitized version of my situation. Car trouble, son gone to get help, miscommunication about waiting with the vehicle. "Sounds like quite the mix-up," she commented, eyes on the road. "You and your son close?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "We used to be," I admitted. "It's been complicated since my wife passed." Diane nodded, seeming to understand more than I'd said. "My husband's been gone 8 years. Changes everything, doesn't it? Especially with kids. They lose one parent and suddenly worry about losing the other, even when they don't show it." I hadn't considered that perspective before, that Jason's behavior might be rooted in fear rather than selfishness. The thought stayed with me as Diane dropped me at the gas station, refusing my offer to repay her when I had access to my wallet again. "Pay it forward," she said simply, before pulling back onto the highway and continuing her journey. The gas station was a small, weathered building with 2 ancient pumps outside. A bell jangled as I pushed open the door, stepping into the blessed dimness of the interior. Behind the counter, a heavy-set man with a salt and pepper beard looked up from his magazine. "Help you?" he asked. I explained my situation, asking to use his phone to call my sister Carol, the only person whose number I knew by heart. The man, Ed, according to his name tag, pushed a cordless phone across the counter without comment. Carol answered on the 4th ring, her voice shifting from annoyance to concern as I explained what had happened. "Jason did what?" she exclaimed. "Are you okay? Where are you exactly?" I relayed my location from the address on the gas station's business card. "I'm at least 3 hours away," she said, "but I'll come get you right now. Just stay there." "Actually," I hesitated, "could you try calling Jason first? My phone's in the car with him. He might have cooled off by now." She agreed reluctantly, promising to call the gas station back either way. While waiting, I bought a bottle of water and a sandwich with the emergency $20 bill I discovered folded in my back pocket. Ed allowed me to sit at the small table by the window, occasionally glancing over with what seemed like a mixture of curiosity and pity. An hour passed. I watched cars pull in for gas, mothers hushing fretful children, teenagers laughing as they selected snacks, ordinary people living ordinary lives untouched by the kind of betrayal I was experiencing. The sandwich remained half-eaten, my appetite diminished by worry and hurt. The phone rang, startling both me and Ed. He answered, listened briefly, then held it out to me. "It's for you." My heart raced as I took the receiver. "Hello? Dad?" Jason's voice was tight, strained in a way I hadn't heard before. "Where are you?" "At the gas station." "Where else would I be?" The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. "Which gas station?" "I've been to 3 already." "Lucky's. About 8 miles from where you left me." "Stay there. I'm coming." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I handed the phone back to Ed, who pretended to be deeply interested in restocking the cigarette display behind him. 20 minutes later, I heard the familiar sound of my own car pulling into the parking lot. Through the window, I watched Jason park and sit motionless behind the wheel for several long moments. When he finally emerged, his face was ashen. The bell jangled again as he entered. Our eyes met across the small space. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "I thought you were dead." Of all the things I had imagined him saying, this wasn't one of them. "What?" "I drove back after about 10 minutes. I was just going to go around the bend and cool off, make you sweat a little." But when I came back, you were gone. I thought maybe you'd tried to walk and—" He swallowed hard. "I've been driving up and down this highway for hours, checking every ditch, every ravine. I thought I'd killed you." The raw fear in his voice was unmistakable. For the first time, I noticed his reddened eyes, the tremor in his hands. "I started walking right away," I said, my anger deflating slightly. "Must have just missed each other." Jason ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his mother that it made my chest ache. "I called the police, the hospitals. I was about to call the morgue when Aunt Carol reached me." We stood in awkward silence, Ed pretending not to eavesdrop from behind his counter. "We should go," I finally said, standing up and nodding a thank you to Ed, who gave me a small salute in return. The walk to the car was tense, each of us unsure what came next. Once inside, with the engine running and the air conditioning blowing cool air against our faces, Jason turned to me. "I'm sorry," he said, the words seeming to cost him considerable effort. "What I did was— there's no excuse for it. None." I studied my son's profile, seeing for the first time the worry lines around his eyes that hadn't been there even a year ago. He looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Why did you come back?" I asked quietly. He stared through the windshield for a long moment. "Because as I was driving away, all I could think about was what Mom would say if she knew what I'd done. How disappointed she would be." His voice caught. "And I realized I couldn't disappoint her like that, even if she's gone." The mention of Margaret opened something in me, a wellspring of grief that had never properly healed. "I miss her too," I admitted. "Every day." Jason nodded, eyes still fixed straight ahead. "I keep trying to, I don't know, outrun it. Like if I just find the right opportunity, make enough money, become successful enough, it won't hurt anymore." He laughed bitterly. "Pretty stupid, huh?" "No," I said, surprising myself with the gentleness in my voice. "I understand that better than you might think." We sat in silence for another moment, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound. "I don't want your money," Jason said suddenly. That was never really what I was after." "What do you want, then?" I asked, genuinely curious. He seemed to consider the question carefully. "I want to stop feeling like I'm not enough, like I'm always disappointing you." The words hit me with the force of revelation. Had I made him feel that way? Had my practical concerns about his future, my frustration with his seeming inability to settle down, communicated a deeper message I never intended? "Jason, you could never disappoint me," I said, the words feeling both true and inadequate. "You're my son, my only child, the best thing I've ever done." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You don't always act like it. You act like I'm a problem to be solved." The accusation stung because there was truth in it. I had been treating my adult son like a project, something to be fixed rather than a person to be understood. "I'm sorry," I said, the words feeling unfamiliar and necessary. "I haven't been the father you needed since your mother died, maybe even before that." Jason finally turned to look at me, surprise evident in his expression. "Are you actually apologizing?" "Don't look so shocked." I managed a small smile. "I'm not perfect. Never claimed to be. Could have fooled me," he muttered, but there was a lightness to his tone that hadn't been there before. We drove in more comfortable silence for a while, the landscape passing in a blur of ochre and dusty green. As we approached Phoenix, Jason cleared his throat. "So, about that job at your old firm." "Yes," I said cautiously. "Do you think, would they still be hiring?" Hope bloomed in my chest, fragile but real. "I could make a call on Monday." He nodded, eyes on the road. "I'd appreciate that. And Dad?" "Yes? I'm really sorry about today. It won't happen again." "I know," I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. As we turned onto our street, the familiar houses with their neatly trimmed lawns coming into view, I realized something important. The desert highway hadn't just been a place of abandonment. It had become the starting point for something new. A chance to rebuild what had been broken between us. not by returning to the past, but by finding a new way forward. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about the strange day and its unexpected lessons. How close we had come to irreparable damage. How fear can masquerade as anger and grief as resentment. How even the deepest wounds might begin to heal with honest words and second chances. And for the first time since Margaret's death, I fell asleep with a sense of hope for the future, my future, and Jason's too. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, just click on the box on the screen. Thank you so much for listening.